Over 400 delegates convening at the 10th Annual African Venture Capital Association Conference taking place in Cape Town. The conference goes beyond the usual dialogue of the African growth story. It involves in-depth discussions on how the private equity could be a catalyst for growth in Africa. We're joined from our Cape Town studios by the CEO of the African Venture Capital Association, also known as AVCA, Michelle Essom. Michelle, thanks so much for joining us. So, I was speaking to Emerging Capital Partners Hurley Doddy yesterday, and he said he's never seen such investor interest to put money into private equity funds right now. Is that really the case?
Yes, I think we're seeing lots of interest, and what I think is particularly interesting is the interest coming from what I call friends and family, so African institutional investors, and that's a really positive sign because African private equity and venture capital is very, very distinctive. It's growth equity, it's cash into African businesses, which can hire and create jobs and spread wealth. So it's very, very unique from what happens in the rest of the world. So I think we're seeing interest by, African institutional investors in South Africa and beyond, and also from global investors.
Mm-hmm. So there we go. As you say, friends, support from friends and family or other Africans to grow these smaller companies. But it's still not as competitive, certainly the private equity space in Africa as it is in the rest of the world. Many say that could be a positive and a negative. I mean, how do you read that?
Well, I think it depends on what you call competitive. I think it is competitive. We have lots of research that shows that you can buy companies or invest in companies at a less expensive rate than you can in developed markets or other emerging markets. So from an investor standpoint, that means there's opportunity by investing in African companies, helping them grow and exiting and making money. So, that's definitely competitive. Also, the underpinnings of the industry is really the Africa growth story, and there are many, many positive things there. The consumer, which is telecoms, is financial services, is fast-moving consumer goods. So it's really taking a bet on this young population, who has a desire for all the things everyone else in the world does, and realizing that by investing in young companies and helping them, to become these, regional or continental powerhouses. So I think it's very, very competitive.
So certainly looking at that, and many saying that the fact that it's still coming off a low base and still not as many private equity players here means there's more time for due diligence and more time for that to make that right investment decision. But when it comes to private equity, though, I mean, there are still challenges in Africa. I mean, what's come out of the conference? What's come out of this conference this time around as some of the biggest challenges that private equity players are up against?
Yes, you're absolutely right. There are challenges. I mean, being the trade association, I'm naturally, very optimistic. But look, Africa is still an emerging continent, a frontier market. There's risk involved, and with any asset class that's risky, you look for commensurate returns. But I think that one thing that makes the industry very distinctive and different than, let's say, private equity in the developed market is the fact that it's been underpinned, supported, born, if you will, by the development finance institutions, which have a very strong mandate to drive environmental, social, and governance. Mm-hmm. So I think from a commercial investor standpoint, who wants to invest in Africa, who wants to invest in Africa private equity, they can take some assurance that there's governance, there's transparency, there's accountability, and there's a long track record because they've been side by side with fund managers in investing in, South Africa, Nigeria, Botswana, et cetera, but also the DRC or Zimbabwe. So, a lot of times the perceptions or the fears that one has about Africa, once you kind of delve in and research and, more importantly, come visit, those kind of fall away. And this is really part of AVCA's mandate, is to get a lot of the research so that you have a clearer and actual picture of what it means to invest in Africa and private equity.
What's the average deal size now? And I'm sure the average is really always misleading. But how would you compare the deal size in Africa relative to, we always compare it to the developed world?
Yes, well, the majority, and I'll speak firstly outside of South Africa. So the majority of fund managers invest at the mid-market, and that can be anywhere from, let's say, $10 to $15 million deal size. But there are also a class of fund managers who invest at the bottom of the pyramid, and that could be under $1 million. So let's say $500,000 up to $10 million. And then you have another class of fund managers who like to do large infrastructure logistics deals. So effectively, the industry is at a really important point where it's building out, and you have managers that are doing deal sizes at the whole end of the scale. Mm-hmm. But I would say within South Africa, which, as you know, has a more developed market, there's the use of leverage in addition to providing growth equity cash. You will see a wider scale in terms of deal sizes and types of transactions. Mm-hmm. But outside of South Africa, sort of in the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, it depends to be the sweet spot, tends to be the mid-market, so $10 to $15 million.